Welcome back. It's 6:45 this Thursday morning. Good to have you with us here on the SA Morning. Our Treasury has made a U-turn on a PFMA exemption that was granted to Eskom. The utility was then going to be exempted from reporting on two very important things: exemption from irregular and wasteful expenditure. No reporting required on that, obviously. It has now changed very quickly. The Finance Minister, eNCA, had come out and said the intention was not to hide corruption, but to actually help raise capital. SAFTU General-Secretary, Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, joins us this morning. Mr. Vavi, good morning to you. Appreciate your time. Do you believe the Finance Minister? Do you believe that's really what the intention was?
No, I simply don't. I think that they put a foot in their own mouth in this particular instance. They took South Africa for granted, and there was an uproar. They have had to make a U-turn, which we welcome. And so the excuse that this was all done in order to help Eskom raise the resources that it needs to raise is neither here or there. That's clearly not true, because when you announce that you're going to exempt an important company, the biggest state-owned enterprise, that already has a debt of billions of rands, and which is already suffering a harm at the reputational level, when its former CEO has gone out in public to say the ANC is using this company as a feeding trough, and that there's corruption and gangsters that are in charge, and that police are colliding and colluding with the crooks that are hijacking everything from Mpumalanga right up to Transnet. And then you suddenly have a government that says we are exempting that very same company from the provisions of sections of the PFMA, so that it may not report incidents of corruption, fraud, and maladministration. Then you will have South Africa correctly raising alarm bells and saying that perhaps the real reason why the state is taking this move is so that the eating, the little eating that Andre de Reiters was speaking about will continue, and continues unabated. And we welcome the fact that they are making a U-turn, but the damage has been done, not to only the confidence South Africa should have on their government, but also to the very same international investors who obviously raise eyebrows when they hear that the government is now intending to exclude Eskom from accountability.
It does make you wonder, and I suppose many organizations and people with know-how on an issue like this, especially politicians, I imagine, would be very worried that this even was touted as an idea, that this idea was thrown around a boardroom, it was thrown around a table of very high-ranking government officials, and they gave it the rubber stamp. It's got to worry about the kind of think tank that's leading government's thinking at the moment.
Absolutely, because it asks a question: which officials would have drafted a memorandum to the minister, misleading him to saying that South Africa and the rest of the international community will accept an exemption of this particular kind. And that should worry everyone, not here, but the people who are expected to invest and help Eskom out of its big black hole, which unfortunately have been dug by the very same government. I mean, if you remember, the main reason why Eskom is so indebted is because the government used the most corrupt companies, such as Hitachi, to which it is conflicted by its own other company that it had shared to, those companies which actually got on the wrong side of the law in America and got to pay heavy fines for corrupting Medupi and Kusile And we know that the source of corruption is that have led to the situation Eskom is finding itself today arise out of Medupi and from Kusile. And there you come. Instead of telling us how many people have been arrested as to what have happened to Hitaki that have been fined in the United States and why it is not being fined and blacklisted in South Africa for creating that 450 billion debt for Eskom. You then have a government that says, sorry, we're going to exempt this company from the provisions of the PFMA.
Mr. Vavi, let me ask you this very quickly, just in closing, forgive me for interrupting, just to get your thoughts. Do you suspect some people on social media, and I don't read too much into social media, but it's an interesting question to ask you as I say goodbye, do you think government is going to now try another way, another avenue of trying to, let's not use the word manipulate, let's call it massage the Eskom numbers in their books? Or do you think this could be the end of it, or do you think they're going to try something else?
Look, we worry that Transnet is already excluded from the provisions of the PFMA. This was going to be the second company. If this is now an establishing trend, you have to worry as to if they get stopped at Eskom, where else they can go. Will they go to BRASA? Will they go to the DBSA? Will they go to Petro SA and exempt them from the provisions of the PFMA? South Africa must continue to have a very close look at this in terms of what is going to happen next.
I appreciate the time and your thoughts on this. SAFTU General-Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi, very clear on what he thinks actually happened here and how it all came to such a sudden stop and a sudden U-turn, if you will. But at the end, raising concerns, and I'm sure many people watching would be thinking the same thing. If this was just Eskom and there was talk of Transnet, what other SOEs could potentially have been involved in something like this as far as government and this exemption from the PFMA? Plenty more reaction throughout the morning here on eNCA.